Hello and welcome to Mining Network's monthly tin outlook. I'm joined today by Christopher Eccleston, Principal of Hallgarten Company and Commodity Strategist in Specialty Metals. Christopher, thank you for joining us. Let's dive straight into tin. It's been quite an impressive rally for the metal over the last 15 months. We've had almost triple the price since the COVID dip lows of around 13,000 to where we are now. Spot price today, 17th of August, is around 36,000. Most of the conversation around this over the last year or so has been around this supply deficit, but also potentially some increase in demand.
I'd agree with the first one. Massive increase in demand, I wouldn't say. There's been a lot of disruption caused by the pandemic. Not only post-pandemic, well, if we are post-pandemic, but the shipping disruptions and delivery disruptions and production disruptions during 2020 resulted in many of the end users who thought that they had, stockpile, cushion, some sort of safety net, or that they could rely upon LME warehouse stocks, found that they ended up running down their own stocks. The LME stocks then plunged also, and with ongoing shipping disruptions and also the heightened shipping rates that we've been seeing, the cost of tin has gone soaring. It's a bit of a chronicle of a crisis foretold, because tin has been underinvested for a long time now. And it's also been on a bit of a road to disaster because of the long-term perception that the big sources of easy production, which were the alluvial deposits of Indonesia and Malaysia, have been looking like they were going to be running out. Haven't run out yet, but they're definitely on the decline. And with no new production from other sources, except maybe some sources out of the DRC, like Alphamin, there has been little in the way of new production. Prices have not been bad. You mentioned 13,000, but for a long time the price was like 19,000, 18,000. Not as good as it was 10 years ago when it was over 20,000. And there's times in the past where it's really spiked. We're in one of those spike periods at the moment. The question is, it's gone on now since late last year, and people thought, okay, well, this is going to be temporary. It's spiked. It's going to go back down again. But there's absolutely no sign that that is going to happen. There's not even an inkling of that, because there's really not much production. Well, there's no production that can be turned on. There are no projects in the pipeline. It's really sort of pretty grim. The people who've got tin, who were producing tin, have done sort of like marginal increases in production that they can squeeze a bit more juice out of their systems, but that's the limit of it. There's no new salvation coming down the line for the tin end users. On the usage side, one of the surprising things was that the price, a lot of metals and other commodities were battered in the first stages of the pandemic, and tin was not exempted from that, but it was really down at 13 for a very small amount of time, maybe a month, 2 months, and those users that I mentioned who ran down their stockpiles thought, we don't know economically what's going to happen after this thing is over, if it's going to be over. I'm referring to the pandemic. And so they weren't too fussed about running down their production, running down the stockpiles. But now they've found that the demand is still there. The demand never really went away. There's disruption in delivering stuff and disruption in factories when workers were sent home. That all came back again pretty fast. And now we've got a situation where there's no new supply. On the usership front, there are not many new applications, but a crucial one is that tin is being seen in some quarters as being the solution to thermal runaway in lithium-ion batteries. So if you use tin as a filter or as a coating inside the parts of a lithium-ion battery that have been prone to this, spontaneous combustion issue, the tin could be the great, solution to this problem, because it is a big problem. Because we saw, I think a few years ago when the Galaxy brought out their new product, same sort of Galaxy, that was that spontaneously combusted. That was sort of like the end of the product pretty damn fast. And then you had other things going on, like major airlines said that they weren't prepared to carry cargo loads of lithium-ion batteries. And also at one point they were even telling people that they had to put their they weren't allowed to put products with lithium-ion batteries into their luggage. They had to have them on hand in case something spontaneously combusted. So this type of battery, particularly in formats like phones, laptops, other types of small equipment, was being under suspicion of being a health danger to the airline industry and others. And it is true that in certain circumstances these batteries can spontaneously combust. And so if tin is the solution, then it's even more icing on the cake for those of us out here who are bullish about the outlook for tin.
Is in this in the battery component, is tin being used as a substitute for another metal, or and how much tin realistically is actually being used in these batteries? I assume most of the demand still lies elsewhere.
It's not being used as a substitute because these batteries have this perceived problem at the moment. They're not going to be pushing something out of the battery formulations. They're just going to be an extra addition to the equation to try and stop this problem. As to how big it will be, how big will the lithium-ion battery business be? We don't know. There are wild projections out there. The projections may be running away from themselves, because if uptake by the public, it's one thing for government to say, oh, you've got to replace all your cars by 2030 with EVs, but the public aren't necessarily getting along with that program, and they're still expensive and charging issues and all that type of thing. So uptake may not be what's expected, but at least at the moment, demand is galloping ahead of supply in most of the battery metal elements. So battery elements. So remains to be seen, but it's more than is currently being used in terms of tin in these formulations. So it's all up.
Okay, so we're in a bit of dilemma, really. There's no, by the sounds of it, no real projects coming online. I think we have spoken in the past about Indonesia and Malaysia also sort of enacting more COVID restrictions. So how that might also affect existing supply, who knows? Have you looked into the recycling side to the market? Can that be ramped up? Obviously, if there needs to be more tin and there just isn't any sources of it.
No, tin is already recycled as much as it can be. Tin goes a lot into alloys. Some of these alloys are not recyclable if the other element that they're alloyed with is not worth recuperating. So that's always a problem with recycling of things that go into alloys. And sometimes the amount of tin that goes into an individual product, just like the amount of gold, for instance, that goes into a cell phone, is so minute that most of the time it's not salvaged. So tin is already recycled. I don't see more recycling happening because it's already because tin, let's face it, at 19,000 a ton was pretty well priced. And so there was an incentive there. It wasn't like it was so cheap that it wasn't worth recycling. It was worth recycling if you could. So already people have in place systems for doing that. That is not going to be the solution. What we need is more mines. A lot of easy pickings aren't out there. I mean, Alphamin's mine in the DRC's got like 4% grade. Most of the other projects that people talk about have grades of less than 1%. So that's really an outlier. And And you have big mines like Minsur in South America, which is in Peru, which has been in decline. So you've got hard rock mines in decline, you've got alluvial mines in decline, and you have very little in the way of new projects coming along after a really long drought, in which companies did not feel it was worthwhile, even at a price of 19,000, to move their projects along. And the markets weren't interested either. When was the last new listing of a tin company?
Obviously,
I can't remember one.
No, neither can I. This can't go on forever. Obviously, the price seems to be going up every month, essentially. What's the cap here? What's the solution? If there is no supply, where does this end up?
Well, just today I heard someone saying 50,000. Someone in the industry who has tin mine, maybe they're wishful thinking, but they were talking about 50,000 a ton. That's really sort of eye-watering territory. The interesting thing, though, is you can move to 50,000 a ton, and there would not there might be a few people who've got wishful thinking that they could get into the tin business, but there aren't really, even at that crazy price, a lot of mines out there or a lot of deposits that you could rush into and get going. So people may not respond at all. Many markets don't know much about tin. I mean, equity markets, mining equity markets. London used to have a tin sector. Australia's had a few listed tin companies. Canada's had virtually none because tin has scarcely been produced ever in North America because the mineralization is just not there. So you have places where tin actually can be mined. Not much in Europe, but a bit in Carpathians. You've got Africa, Central Africa, and Namibia. You've got places like Bolivia, Bolivia being the classic tin producer, but where there's not much big production anymore compared to the famed past of Bolivia in that metal. Peru, bit out of Brazil, in the past, a tiny bit out of Argentina. And then you've got these Southeast Asian countries. You've got China. Australia has been a big tin producer in the past out of Tasmania, and Tasmania is still where they're producing tin in Australia. But many of the mines there are no longer functional. And mines on the mainland, Australian mainland, there have been projects in the past, but none of them are functioning at the moment. So there's tin around, except in North America, and not much is happening about it.
This can't go on forever, though, can it? So does it eventually?
Tin is not really a product that's easy to replace, because tin itself over the last 10 years has been a beneficiary of the move away from lead in solders. And when they came out and they said lead has to be replaced in solders because it's dangerous and the fumes and the lead poisoning, et cetera, they then switched to tin. There's no other solder really that you can switch to out of tin now that you switched out of lead, unless you're going to go back to lead. And that's not going to be politically acceptable. So it's really difficult to see a scenario in which people will use less tin.
Right. So with that in mind, is it still an opportunity for investors? Obviously, a lot of the equities that are producing have gone up quite a bit over this time period, and no one really knows what is going to happen. It sounds like that we have a few more months, if not a few more years, of growth in the industry in terms of the price of tin. How can investors actually leverage themselves against it, or if they miss the boat?
Well, they could actually bring tin companies to the market. They could actually mobilize some of the old projects that are out there, known deposits, or find new ones. Afritin, which is a company listed in London, has been reworking old tailings piles in Namibia, and it hopes to actually then get into the mining business itself. So there are possibilities out there in old mines, because back in the old days, decades ago, the price of tin was much lower, so many of these mines were high graded. So a lot of low grade product went to the dumps. And interestingly, there's a mine, a former producer in Zimbabwe, that is now going to be reopened, but it's going to be reopened as a lithium mine, supposedly, because lithium and tin appear together quite commonly in what are called lithium tin tantalum pegmatites. So that when you've got the tin in a pegmatite and you've got these other metals in it, then you can potentially get more bangs for your bucks with these subsidiary metals, and lithium is one of them in the case of these pegmatites. Many companies are talking about the potential of the lithium in their pegmatites, but they may be mistaken. They should be actually looking at the other metals that they've got, because at these prices, the tin is the more attractive thing than even the lithium at this stage.
Yeah, well, we both know that when a commodity is hot, companies start changing their name and their main commodity focus.
No, very true.
So
very true.
maybe we'll
but
see a bit of that.
The problem is that there aren't that many people that are au fait with tin, and so they can't talk the talk about it because they've never done so. But then that didn't stop them in the rare earth space when rare earth became hot. So
yeah,
maybe when the Vancouver promoters discover tin, get out of the way.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you so much for your time, Christopher. Always a pleasure.
Great.
For those of you not familiar with Hallgarten, I'll put a link to their website below. There's loads of really good research on there, so definitely check them out.